The very walls of ancient courtrooms could decide a person's fate before a single word was spoken. We are exploring 21 ancient courtroom designs that decided more than justice, revealing how architecture shaped verdicts and controlled societies. These spaces were not neutral grounds for fairness but powerful tools used to project authority, invoke divine judgment, and reinforce social order. You will discover how a room's layout, its height, and even the materials used could intimidate the accused, sway a jury, or make a ruler's word feel like a god's command. How did a simple stone bench become an instrument of power? And why did some cultures hold trials under the open sky while others built overwhelming, enclosed halls of judgment? By the end of this journey, you will see the hidden language of power etched into stone and space, understanding how design was used to control the minds of those who entered. What does it truly mean to be judged, not just by people, but by the very room you stand in? Justice was never just a set of rules in the ancient world. It was a living, breathing force woven into the fabric of society, inseparable from the gods, the king, and the very land itself. This profound connection meant that a courtroom could never be just four walls and a bench. Its design had to serve a higher purpose, acting as a stage for power, a conduit for the divine, and a mirror for a culture's deepest beliefs. A space where a dispute between neighbors could be settled might also host a sacred ritual to appease an angry god or serve as the backdrop for a ruler to display his unchallengeable authority. The architecture was not an accident. It was a deliberate tool, carefully crafted to channel what people perceived as cosmic order, directly influencing everyone who stepped inside. The values of a society, its hierarchies, and even its fears were literally set in stone within these judicial spaces. These designs manipulated perception, guided emotion, and silently argued for a particular verdict long before the first piece of evidence was ever presented. This deep, multifaceted role of the courtroom sets the stage for our very first and perhaps most fundamental design. This connection between the earthly and the divine found its ultimate expression in the heart of Mesopotamia. At the base of a massive ziggurat, justice was not just delivered, it was performed. Imagine a vast, open-air platform of sun-baked brick, dominated by the immense stair-step temple, rising like a man-made mountain towards the sky. Here, priests and rulers would sit in judgment, their every word echoing against a structure believed to be the literal gateway to the gods. The towering ziggurat behind them was not mere backdrop. It was the most powerful participant in the proceedings, a silent argument for the divine endorsement of every verdict. This architectural choice was profoundly intentional. The adjudicators were physically elevated on a platform, placing them literally above the common people who gathered below. This created a powerful visual hierarchy, reinforcing their authority not merely as officials, but as intermediaries chosen to interpret a higher will. Common cases heard in this overwhelming space included property disputes between farmers or accusations of religious offenses, matters that threatened the delicate social and cosmic order. With the ziggurat looming overhead, every judgment felt preordained, as if channeled directly from deities like Shamash, the god of justice and the sun. To dispute a ruling made in its shadow was not just to argue with a man, but to challenge the very order of the universe. This design perfectly merged spiritual and temporal power, using architecture to make authority feel absolute and divinely sanctioned. While the Mesopotamian ziggurat projected power through overwhelming scale, the ancient Egyptians achieved a similar effect through perfect, intimidating harmony. Their courtrooms were not just venues for judgment, they were physical manifestations of the goddess Mat herself, the very embodiment of truth, balance, and cosmic order. To stand in one of these spaces was to stand inside a divine principle. The design was meticulously symmetrical, a visual representation of the equilibrium the court was meant to restore. At the center of this balance sat the chief judge, their throne positioned directly beneath a carved or painted depiction of Mat, her iconic ostrich feather a constant, silent reminder of the test every soul would face in the afterlife. This was not subtle decoration, it was a direct architectural threat and a promise. The verdict delivered in this room was merely a preview of a far greater judgment to come. Flanking the participants were towering columns, every surface covered in hieroglyphs. These were not random inscriptions, but carefully chosen laws and moral codes, surrounding everyone in a cage of written righteousness. There was no escaping the rules, they were quite literally on the walls. Light played a crucial role in this psychological theater. Strategic openings in the ceiling or high walls allowed shafts of sunlight to cut through the dim, incense-filled air, illuminating the judge and the symbols of the gods while often leaving the accused in shadow. This dramatic interplay of light and dark made it feel as though the deities were watching, their gaze focused on the proceedings. A dispute over inheritance or an accusation of theft was thus transformed into a sacred ritual, a necessary act to maintain the balance of the entire universe. The architecture ensured that justice was not simply heard. It was a profound, multisensory experience designed to leave no doubt about its divine origin. But this divine authority gave way to a radical new idea, one born in the bustling agora of ancient Athens. Justice could be a public spectacle, decided not by a king or a priest, but by the people themselves. This revolutionary concept found its home in the Dikasterion, a massive, open-air theater dedicated solely to the law. Imagine stepping into one of these spaces, not as a subject pleading before a throne, but as a citizen facing a jury of your peers, 500 or even 1,000 strong. The architecture was designed for pure, overwhelming democracy. The jurors sat on stepped, semicircular benches that rose like a mountainside, ensuring every single person had a clear, unobstructed view of the two opposing speakers in the circular orchestra below. There was nowhere to hide. The brilliant acoustics of the design meant a well-placed voice could carry to the very back row, making every argument, every piece of evidence, and every emotional appeal a shared public experience. This transparency was the bedrock of the entire process. To cast their votes, jurors used simple, clever bronze ballots, discs with a hollow axle for innocent and a solid one for guilty, dropped into separate urns. The system was designed to be anonymous and efficient, a physical expression of a collective decision. The sheer scale of the operation was its greatest defense against corruption. How could anyone possibly bribe or intimidate 500 men? The architecture itself made elitism and backroom deals practically impossible. By placing justice directly in the hands of so many ordinary citizens, the Dikasterian's design reinforced a powerful, lasting idea that legal judgment is a public duty for the common good, not a private privilege for the powerful few. Yet even the open democracy of Athens could not match the sheer, organized might of Roman law. Rome took the concept of a public legal space and amplified it into a monument of imperial power with the Basilica. This was not a single-purpose building but a grand, multi-functional hall where the business of an empire was conducted. Under its cavernous, soaring roof, you could shop for goods, discuss politics, and witness justice being served, all in the same magnificent space. The design was both practical and profoundly intimidating. A long central nave stretched towards a semicircular apse at one end, where the magistrate would sit enthroned on a raised platform, his position elevated far above the citizens who approached to plead their cases. Flanking him were rows of massive marble columns, supporting a ceiling so high it seemed to dwarf every human concern. The message was one of imperial permanence and overwhelming authority. The very stones whispered that Rome was eternal, and its law was the unshakable foundation of the civilized world. This grand scale served a crucial function, allowing large crowds to gather and observe the proceedings. Public scrutiny was a Roman virtue, a way to demonstrate that justice, while majestic and stern, was not secretive, but the architecture left no doubt about where the ultimate power resided. The judge, bathed in light from high windows, looked down upon the litigants, his figure framed by the grandeur of the apse. This physical elevation was a direct, non-verbal assertion of his authority, a constant reminder that his word was backed by the full force of the state. By integrating the court into the bustling heart of public life, the Basilica reinforced a powerful idea that law and order were not abstract concepts but the very pillars holding up daily existence. This seamless blend of function and awe-inspiring form would go on to influence the design of courthouses for centuries to come. The Imperial Roman Basilica spoke of law through grand, open spectacle, but in China, justice was a matter of strict, unyielding hierarchy. The Yamen court was the beating heart of local government, a walled complex where the magistrate served as judge, tax collector, and administrator, all rolled into one. Stepping into its courtyard was to enter a meticulously designed machine for asserting control. At the far end sat the magistrate, elevated on a high dais and shielded behind an enormous desk, a figure so distant he seemed almost untouchable. Flanking him were rows of clerks, their heads bent over documents, and stern guards standing rigidly at attention. This arrangement created a human wall of officialdom, a visual barrier that made the judge seem less like a man and more like the unfeeling embodiment of the state itself. And in the open space before them, completely exposed, knelt the accused. There was no roof to offer shelter from the beating sun or the pouring rain. This deliberate exposure to the elements was a form of psychological pressure, a constant physical reminder of their vulnerability and lowly status before the immense power of the empire. The stone pavement was hard and unforgiving, ensuring discomfort was a permanent part of the experience. Every aspect of the design minimized the individual's humanity while maximizing the state's overwhelming presence. Even the decorations served this purpose. Behind the magistrate, a large screen was often painted with a majestic scene of mountains and oceans. This was not a peaceful landscape, it was a powerful symbol. It represented the vast, unchanging territory of the emperor, reminding everyone in the courtyard that the magistrate's authority flowed directly from the Son of Heaven in the Forbidden City. A verdict here was never just about a single crime. It was about maintaining the Confucian ideal of societal harmony. The architecture ensured that any challenge to this order, however small, would feel like a rebellion against the natural world itself. Across the world, a very different kind of open-air court used spectacle to deliver a verdict from the gods. The Mayan Ball Court was an arena of life and death, where justice was decided not with words but with a rubber ball. These were not mere sporting grounds, they were sacred spaces where legal disputes, political rivalries, and accusations of impiety could be settled in a single, brutal game. The architecture was unmistakable, a stark eye-shaped alley flanked by two massive, sloping walls. These walls were not barriers, they were instruments of the game, designed to bounce the heavy, solid rubber ball at unpredictable angles, making the contest as much about fate as it was about skill. High above the playing floor, on stone platforms built directly into the walls, sat the ruling elite. Their elevated position was a constant visual reminder of their power to observe, to judge, and to interpret the outcome as a divine message. The entire design functioned as a colossal amplifier. The chants of the crowd, the thud of the ball against stone, and the pronouncements of the priests would echo and reverberate throughout the enclosed space, creating an overwhelming sensory experience that heightened the tension for everyone involved, especially the players. For them, this was a trial by ordeal. The outcome of the game was seen as a direct reflection of the gods' will. A victory was a clear sign of divine favor and innocence, while a loss could mean more than just disgrace. It could mean a sentence of death. The court's architecture transformed a legal proceeding into a public ritual, blurring the line between spectator sport and sacred judgment, making the entire community witnesses to a verdict that felt handed down from the heavens themselves. The verdict on a Mayan Ball Court was absolute, delivered by the gods themselves through the bounce of a rubber ball. Yet in the heart of the Persian Empire, a very different kind of power was on display, one that was entirely man-made and meticulously stage-managed. The Apadana Palace Hall at Persepolis was not a place for divine games but for calculated human theater. This was the empire's magnificent nerve center, a space where royal audiences and judicial matters blended seamlessly into a single performance of absolute power. To enter this hall was to be overwhelmed by a carefully orchestrated vision of dominance. The king sat enthroned upon a raised platform, sheltered under a grand ceremonial canopy, his figure the undisputed focal point of the entire vast chamber. All around him, the hall was supported by colossal columns, each one towering over any human and stretching towards a distant, shadowed ceiling. The sheer scale was meant to dwarf any visitor, to make even the most noble ambassador feel insignificant. But the true psychological genius of the Apadana lay in the floor itself. Anyone seeking an audience or petitioning for justice had to cross an immense, open expanse of polished stone. With every step, they grew smaller in the king's sight, their long, solitary walk a humbling ritual of submission. This deliberate journey was a silent argument for the crown's authority, a physical manifestation of the vast social distance between the ruler and the ruled. The walls surrounding this walk of humility were covered in intricate stone reliefs, a continuous parade of carved ambassadors from every corner of the empire, each bringing tribute to the Persian king. The message was inescapable. You are just one of many, your fate is a small concern within a vast realm, and your loyalty is the only currency that truly matters. In this setting, justice could never be blind or impartial. It was a tool of the state, a reward for obedience and a punishment for disloyalty. The Apadana's design ensured that every legal outcome, whether a land dispute or a treason charge, first and foremost reinforced the absolute power of the king and the interests of his boundless empire. This fusion of aesthetics and absolute authority reached its zenith in the royal courts of ancient India, known as the Raj Darbar. The throne room was a masterpiece of psychological design, a space where every single element was meticulously calculated to inspire awe and submission. At its center sat the ruler, not merely on a chair but upon an elevated, often jewel-encrusted throne, positioned directly beneath a magnificent ceremonial umbrella. This was no simple piece of decor. The umbrella was a profound symbol of divine sanction, a visual declaration that the king's power was protected and ordained by the gods themselves. The architecture enforced a strict social hierarchy through its very floor plan. The vast hall was divided into precise concentric sections, with the distance one was permitted to stand from the throne directly corresponding to their rank and status. A high-ranking noble might stand on an ornate carpet just steps away, while a common petitioner would be kept far back on the bare stone floor. their physical separation a constant, humbling reminder of their place in the cosmic and social order. Justice here was a daily public ritual, seamlessly woven into the spectacle of governance. A farmer bringing a land dispute or a merchant accusing a partner of theft would find themselves dwarfed by staggering opulence, surrounded by walls layered in gold leaf, intricate carvings of deities, and the silent, watchful gaze of armed guards adorned in ceremonial splendor. The overwhelming sensory experience of wealth and power was deliberate, designed to make any visitor feel small and instinctively deferential. This ensured that legal proceedings were never just about the facts of a case. They were powerful performances reinforcing the ruler's wisdom and unchallengeable authority. A verdict was accepted not merely because it was fair, but because it was delivered from within a scene of such divinely appointed magnificence that to question it seemed almost sacrilegious. Far from the opulent, gold-leafed halls of Indian royalty, justice could also be found in the stark, windswept landscapes of the Viking world. The Norse Thingstead was a monument to collective will, carved not from stone but from the very earth itself. These were the open-air assemblies where free men gathered to debate laws, settle disputes, and decide the fate of their community. They chose their locations with profound intention, often on a natural elevation like a hill or a burial mound, a place already steeped in ancestral significance. A circle of standing stones would mark the sacred boundary of the meeting ground, separating the world of everyday concerns from the space where law was spoken. The semicircular or circular design was not an accident. It was a powerful symbol of unity and equality. Every man present, from the wealthiest landowner to the humblest farmer, stood on the same ground, arranged in a ring so that all could see and hear each other clearly. The natural bowl shape of the hilltop acted as a giant amplifier, carrying the voice of the law speaker at the center to the very edges of the crowd. This man did not rule from a throne. He stood among his peers, reciting the law from memory to guide the assembly. His central position was one of function and respect, not of absolute power. The true authority rested with the collective, a roaring chorus of ayes or nays that decided every verdict. To stand in the Thingstead was to feel the weight of that community, to see the faces of your neighbors under the vast, open sky, a constant reminder that the gods themselves were watching. This design made justice a public responsibility, a shared burden that fostered both fierce independence and deep social bonds, proving that order could be forged not by a crown but by consensus. But this consensus forged under open skies stood in stark contrast to the imperial spectacle of Constantinople. The Byzantine Hippodrome was a thunderous bowl of noise and color, a space where the line between entertainment and justice was deliberately and brilliantly blurred. The emperor did not hide away in a private chamber to hear legal petitions. He held court from the Kathisma, his lavish imperial box overlooking the chariot track. Here, before tens of thousands of roaring spectators, he would dispense judgments as part of the day's grand entertainment. The architectural genius of this design was its sheer, overwhelming scale. From the cramped seats high in the upper tiers, the emperor would have appeared as a distant, glittering figure, almost godlike in his isolation and splendor. His voice, likely projected by heralds, would echo across the vast arena, making every pronouncement feel like a decree issued from on high. This was power amplified, both literally and figuratively. The verdicts delivered here were not meant to be debated. They were meant to be witnessed and absorbed by the entire city, a powerful reminder of the emperor's role as God's sole representative on earth. Yet the crowd was not a silent witness. Their thunderous cheers or angry jeers could ripple through the stands, creating a palpable force that a shrewd emperor could not ignore. A deeply unpopular verdict risked sparking riots that could topple a regime, making the Hippodrome tribunal a dangerous, high-stakes game. This fusion of legal authority and public spectacle created a potent form of political theater, where justice was performed to ensure loyalty through a powerful combination of awe, admiration, and raw, calculated fear. The thunderous roar of the Hippodrome crowd gave way to a profound and deliberate silence. In the medieval Islamic world, justice sought not spectacle but serenity. The court of the Qadi, or judge, was a place of radical simplicity, often held within the quiet corners of a mosque or in a bare, unadorned room. This stark minimalism was its own form of power, a complete rejection of earthly grandeur in favor of divine truth. The Qadi himself sat not upon a throne but on a simple cushion or mat, his posture one of humility before a law far greater than any man. There were no towering columns, no gold leaf, no intimidating guards. The focus was directed entirely towards the sacred texts, the Quran, and the books of legal scholarship that guided his every decision. Every element of this design served a single purpose: to strip away the distractions of the ego and the world, reminding the judge, the plaintiff, and the defendant that true justice flowed from eternal principles, not from human pride or whim. The open nature of these sessions, often attended by community elders and scholars, ensured a vital transparency. Yet the austere, reverent atmosphere encouraged deep reflection and brutal honesty, compelling participants to speak truthfully not out of fear of a ruler, but out of respect for a sacred duty. In this quiet space, architecture became a vessel for faith, transforming a legal proceeding into an act of devotion. A world away from the Qadi's humble chamber, justice in medieval England was a cold, hard display of feudal power. The great hall of a Norman castle was the heart of the fortress, a place for feasting, shelter, and the unwavering assertion of the lord's authority. When court was in session, the entire space transformed into a theater of judgment. The lord or his appointed judge sat enthroned upon a raised wooden dais at the far end of the long, rectangular room, positioned behind the high table where he normally dined. This physical elevation was a constant, visual reminder of his supreme status, placing him literally above everyone else in the hall. Behind him, elaborate tapestries depicting biblical scenes or military victories hung on the stone walls, their imagery silently arguing for a divine right to rule and a history of formidable strength. The immense fireplace crackled, providing warmth but also casting flickering, dramatic shadows that danced across the serious faces of the officials and guards flanking the dais. For any defendant, the experience was a calculated ordeal of intimidation. They were forced to enter through the main doors and walk the entire, exposed length of the hall. Every step was taken under the silent, judgmental gaze of the Lord's retinue and the gathered spectators, a long march that felt like an eternity of shame and vulnerability before they even reached the center of the room. High, narrow windows allowed shafts of natural light to cut through the smoky air, often illuminating the judge on his platform while leaving the accused in relative shadow. This stark interplay of light and dark added a layer of divine drama to the proceedings, as if God himself was shining a spotlight on the seat of power. From property disputes between serfs to accusations of petty theft, every verdict delivered in this overwhelming space served a dual purpose. It resolved the immediate conflict while simultaneously reinforcing the entire feudal structure, making it terrifyingly clear that justice was not blind, but served the singular purpose of maintaining the social order and the absolute authority of the man on the dais. Yet this cold, stone authority was a world away from the vibrant, terrifying heart of the Aztec Empire. In the center of Tenochtitlan, justice was a cosmic performance on a stage called the Tlacxitlan. This was not a building but a sacred platform, an open-air court meticulously positioned within the city's main ceremonial plaza. Here, judges sat in high authority, their bench overlooking the vast public square and framed by towering temples and imposing sculptures of powerful gods. The entire space was a masterpiece of sacred geometry, its dimensions and alignments carefully calculated to mirror the movements of the sun and stars. This was not just architectural decoration, it was a profound statement that the law itself was a celestial force, as fixed and predetermined as the heavens above. For an accused person brought before this court, the experience was one of total exposure. They stood on the open stones of the plaza, vulnerable under the harsh sun or the rain, while the judges, priests, and observing nobles looked down from their shaded, elevated positions. This physical arrangement was a perfect map of Aztec society, a clear hierarchy from the earthly to the divine. Every element, from the intimidating god statues to the precise astronomical alignments, silently argued that the state's judgment was not a matter of human opinion but a necessary act to maintain the balance of the universe itself. A verdict from the Tlacxitlan felt inevitable, a righteous outcome woven into the very fabric of creation, making dissent seem not just foolish but sacrilegious. This stark, open-air platform of the Aztecs could not be more different from the contained, meticulously controlled spaces of feudal Japan. In the bustling cities of the Edo period, justice was administered not in a grand plaza, but within the quiet, orderly confines of the Bugyōsho, the magistrate's office. Every element of this space was a deliberate exercise in control, designed to strip away chaos and emotion, leaving only the cold, formal process of the law. The magistrate did not sit on a throne but behind a low screen or upon a slightly raised section of the floor, his figure partially obscured to emphasize his role as an impartial instrument of the shogun's will, not as an approachable individual. Before him, plaintiffs and defendants knelt on tatami mats, their positions fixed at a lower level, physically enacting the societal hierarchy that placed the state's authority above all. Partitions subtly separated the parties, preventing direct confrontational eye contact and forcing all communication to be channeled through the magistrate. The architecture enforced a ritualistic silence and stillness. Sliding paper doors, known as fusuma, allowed the space to be configured with perfect precision, while the minimal decor, perhaps a single scroll with calligraphy, reflected Zen principles of emptiness and clarity. There were no distractions, no grand artworks, nothing to provoke an emotional response. The goal was to create a calm, focused atmosphere where every word was measured and every gesture was formal. This design minimized outbursts and ensured that decisions appeared utterly reasoned and detached from human frailty. It was a brilliant psychological tool for maintaining stability, making the law feel like an inevitable, unemotional force of nature itself, perfectly aligned with the rigid, orderly society it was built to control. The stark, orderly silence of the Japanese magistrate's court gave way to an entirely different kind of intimidation, one built not on control but on celestial awe. In the shadowy chapels and echoing cloisters of medieval Europe, the church wielded its authority through Gothic architecture, transforming legal proceedings into profound spiritual ordeals. These ecclesiastical courts, operating under canon law, were often held within the very heart of a cathedral. To stand accused here was to be dwarfed by a forest of stone pillars that soared upwards into ribbed vaults, their peaks lost in a dim, dusty height. The entire space seemed to strain toward heaven, a physical prayer in stone that left the human form feeling insignificant and exposed. Light did not simply enter through the windows. It was fractured into 1,000 jewel-toned fragments by immense stained glass, depicting saints and biblical scenes that watched the proceedings with unblinking, colored eyes. This was not mere decoration. It was a constant, overwhelming reminder that the law being applied governed not just actions, but the eternal fate of one's soul. The judge, often a bishop or high-ranking cleric, would sit in a position of immense symbolic power, his chair placed near the altar where the most sacred rituals were performed. This deliberate placement blurred the line between legal decree and divine commandment, making his word feel as if it carried the weight of God himself. Every sound, from a nervous whisper to the pronouncement of a verdict, was caught and amplified by the perfect acoustics of the vaulted space, echoing as if the very building were repeating and judging every word. For a common layperson, this sensory overload was paralyzing. The grandeur, the dim light, and the sacred imagery worked in concert to provoke a deep sense of piety, fear, and guilt, ensuring compliance long before the final judgment was even read. In this setting, justice was not just delivered, it was a visceral, moral experience designed to reinforce the absolute power of the Church over every aspect of life and death. This unseen presence was the ultimate form of power. In the heart of the Ottoman Empire, the Sultan presided over his Divan, a council of state, from behind a golden grille or a latticed screen. He was a voice in the shadows, a listener in the walls, completely hidden from the viziers and petitioners who filled the lavishly decorated chamber. This architectural choice was a masterpiece of psychological control. The ruler could observe every detail, hear every whispered plea and heated debate, while remaining an enigma himself. His physical invisibility created an aura of mystery and omnipotence, suggesting he was not merely a man but a disembodied force of judgment, as all-knowing and all-seeing as a god. The room itself reinforced this message of supreme authority. Intricate Islamic tiles in deep blues and vibrant reds covered the walls, depicting perfectly ordered floral patterns that mirrored the desired order of the empire. Plush, expansive carpets from the finest looms silenced footsteps and added to the hushed, reverent atmosphere. Lofty domes were adorned with breathtaking calligraphy, swirling verses from the Quran that intertwined divine law with the Sultan's own earthly decrees. For a petitioner brought into this opulent space, the experience was overwhelming. They approached through a precise choreography of deference, bowing low before a screen that gave nothing away. Their fate was being decided by an unseen power surrounded by staggering beauty and immense wealth, a constant reminder of the empire's vast resources and the absolute futility of defiance. Every judgment that emerged from behind that grille felt inevitable and infallible, less a legal ruling and more a pronouncement from an invisible throne, perfectly designed to cultivate not just obedience but total, awe-struck submission. High in the Andes, justice was a matter of cosmic alignment. The Inca Ushnu was far more than a simple stone platform. It was the axis of the universe, a sacred stage where law, religion, and astronomy converged into a single, undeniable truth. Built at the precise center of a vast ceremonial plaza, this stepped pyramid was meticulously oriented to celestial events, its position calculated so that the sun or certain stars would align with its corners during solstices or important festivals. This was not a coincidence, it was a deliberate architectural declaration that the law of the Inca was as fixed and eternal as the movements of the heavens themselves. During a judicial proceeding, the ruling Sapa Inca or his high priest would stand upon the Ushnu's highest platform, elevated so far above the gathered crowd that he appeared to touch the sky. From this godlike vantage point, he would pronounce judgments, his voice carrying across the open plaza with an authority that felt both imperial and divine. The rituals performed here were integral to the legal process. As a case was heard, priests might pour offerings of chicha corn beer into a special channel that ran through the structure, a libation for the earth itself. This act physically linked the verdict to the well-being of the entire empire, suggesting that a fair judgment would ensure fertile crops and harmony, while an unjust one could bring famine and disaster. The massive, open design of the surrounding plaza forced the entire community to bear witness, transforming each legal decision into a public reaffirmation of the sacred social order. To question a verdict delivered from the Ashnu was to challenge the cosmos, the gods, and the very stability of the world. The unseen power of the Ottoman Sultan and the celestial authority of the Inca Ashnu both manipulated perception through grand design, but some cultures found their supreme courtroom required no construction at all. For the ancient Celts, the most powerful judicial space was a living one, a sacred grove known as a nemeton. These were clearings deep within the forest, encircled by ancient oaks and moss-covered stones, places where the veil between the earthly and the spiritual worlds was believed to be at its very thinnest. To enter a nemeton was to step into a cathedral built by nature itself, its towering trees forming living pillars and its canopy a vaulted ceiling of rustling leaves. The air itself felt different, thick with the presence of ancestral spirits and ancient deities believed to inhabit every stream, stone, and gnarled root. This was not a neutral setting, it was an active participant in the proceedings, a silent witness that held everyone accountable to a higher, older law. The layout was almost always circular or oval, a shape that reflected the Celtic view of the cosmos and promoted a profound sense of equality. Within this natural ring, the elders and warriors would gather, no one person physically elevated above another. Their status came from wisdom and reputation, not from a raised throne. Disputes over cattle raids, land boundaries, or accusations of oath-breaking were debated and discussed until a consensus was reached, a collective agreement that was seen as being guided by the will of the spirits themselves. The rustle of leaves in the wind could be interpreted as a divine whisper of approval, the call of a specific bird a sign of caution. This deep connection to the environment made every verdict feel timeless and inherently righteous, not merely a ruling for the moment but a restoration of the natural order. The nemeton's design, or lack thereof, fostered a powerful, binding sense of community and reverence, proving that the most intimidating courtroom could be one with no walls, where the ultimate judge was the land itself. A king appeared directly from the stone itself. This was the overwhelming power of the terrace of the elephants in the heart of the Khmer Empire. This was not a mere viewing stand but a 300-meter-long proclamation of royal authority, its entire facade a breathtaking tapestry of carved stone. Intricate parades of elephants, their stone trunks seeming to sway, marched alongside depictions of Garuda birdmen and Hindu deities, all woven together into a single, unbreakable narrative of divine kingship. For a subject summoned to this space, the message was immediate and terrifyingly clear. The ruler was not just a man, he was the central figure in a cosmic order, supported by mythical beasts and powerful gods. His judicial appearances were meticulously staged public spectacles. He would emerge suddenly upon the high platform, elevated far above the crowds gathered in the open square below. This dramatic entrance, seemingly from the walls of the palace complex itself, made him appear less like a human administrator and more like a living god descending to dispense his will. The verdicts he delivered from this celestial perch were performed with the same grandeur as the military parades and ceremonial dances that shared the space. A land dispute or a case of theft was transformed into a piece of imperial theater, where justice and entertainment became inseparable. The roaring crowds, the vibrant colors, and the sheer scale of the carvings all worked in concert to create a sense of awe so potent it bordered on fear. To challenge a judgment made here was to deny the entire visual and spiritual spectacle unfolding before your eyes. to argue against the stone-carved gods themselves. This brilliant fusion ensured that every legal act, no matter how mundane, simultaneously reinforced the empire's strength, its divinity, and the absolute necessity of obedience. Beneath the sprawling branches of a great baobab tree, justice felt less like a verdict and more like a homecoming. Across many traditional African societies, the most powerful courtroom required no construction at all, finding its form in the village clearing under the generous shade of an ancient tree. This was the moot court, a space where the very architecture was living and breathing. The elders, revered for their wisdom and life experience, did not sit on a high platform but arranged themselves in a circle on low stools or mats. This deliberate circular seating plan was a profound rejection of hierarchy, a physical declaration that every voice held equal weight and that the goal was not to command from above but to understand from within. There were no raised benches, no intimidating desks, and no guards. The circle was open, allowing the entire community to gather around its edges and bear witness, making the process transparent and collective. A dispute over stolen livestock or a fractured marriage would be discussed not as a crime to be punished, but as a tear in the community's social fabric that needed mending. The natural setting played a crucial role in this philosophy. The gentle rustle of leaves and the dappled sunlight created an atmosphere of calm reflection, discouraging anger and encouraging honest confession. The goal was always restorative justice, to uncover the root of the conflict, facilitate apology, and agree on compensation that would heal relationships and restore balance to the village. This design placed community harmony above the punishment of an individual, understanding that a verdict that left bitterness in its wake was no justice at all. It was a system built on the belief that the law's true purpose is not to divide, but to weave people back together. This careful balance between ancient tradition and thoughtful debate found its ultimate expression in a very specific room in Jerusalem. The chamber of the Hebrew Sanhedrin was a masterclass in deliberate design. Its semicircular layout a physical representation of collective wisdom. 71 elders, scholars, and priests sat arranged in a perfect arc, each member able to see the face of every other. This was no accident. It was a crucial architectural choice to foster open dialogue and ensure that no single voice could dominate the proceedings. At the very center of the curve sat the Nasi, the president of the assembly. His central position was not one of supreme power, but of a moderator, a first among equals responsible for guiding a rigorous and thorough exchange of ideas. The members themselves were seated by age and expertise, a visible hierarchy of experience that honored tradition while still ensuring every perspective could be heard. The room itself was part of the temple complex, a constant, sobering reminder that the laws they debated and the judgments they rendered were not mere human ordinances, but interpretations of divine will. This sacred context elevated every discussion, from a complex property dispute to a matter of religious doctrine, infusing each verdict with a profound sense of gravity. The architecture itself acted as a guard against rash decisions and autocratic rule, forcing a process of meticulous deliberation where wisdom was woven from many threads of argument. This ancient design, where space was shaped to serve principle, would echo through centuries, leaving a quiet but enduring legacy on how societies structure their most solemn quest for justice. From the sun-baked ziggurats of Mesopotamia to the deliberative chamber of the Hebrew Sanhedrin, these 21 ancient designs reveal a profound and unsettling truth. Justice was never just a set of rules scribbled on a scroll. It was a living performance where architecture itself played the lead role. Every stone bench, every towering column, and every open-air plaza was a deliberate tool, meticulously crafted to project power, to channel divine will, or to enforce a rigid social order. These spaces were designed to intimidate the accused, to awe the spectators, and to legitimize the verdict long before the first word of testimony was ever spoken. They show us that a society's deepest values, its fears, and its aspirations are not just written in its laws, but literally carved into its courtrooms. The cold, hard stones of these ancient halls were never neutral. They were active participants in every trial, silently arguing for a specific outcome. And if you listen closely, you can still hear their echoes today. Look at the high benches and imposing columns of a modern courthouse, the silent formality of the chamber, the deliberate placement of every participant. These are not merely functional choices, they are the distant descendants of these ancient psychological blueprints, continuing a tradition where the space itself is meant to command respect and convey authority. The quest for a perfectly fair and impartial space continues, a silent conversation with the ghosts of courtrooms past. What do you think? Does the design of a modern courtroom put you at ease or make you feel small? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this journey into the hidden language of legal architecture, subscribe for more deep dives into the forgotten corners of history. Remember, the next time you see an image of a courthouse, look beyond the trial and see the story its stones are trying to tell. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the powerful architecture of ancient justice. If this exploration into the stories hidden in stone captivated you, please show your support by liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more deep dives into historical mysteries. Your engagement helps us continue to uncover the past. Let us know in the comments which of these 21 courtroom designs you found most compelling, and be sure to tap the bell icon so you never miss our next investigation. For those eager to learn more, you will find a curated list of further reading and resources waiting for you in the video description below. Until our next adventure together, keep questioning the world around you.